The intro video was the logo for the Heumann Perspective, with purple and orange concentric circles swirling around a photo of Judy Heumann. The intro fades into a video interview between Judy Heumann and Emily and Ellen Ladau. Judy Heumann is a white woman with short brown hair and glasses. She uses a motorized wheelchair and is wearing a white top with embroidered red, yellow, and blue flowers on it. Behind her is her dining room and pictures of friends and family. Emily and Ellen Ladau are in their living room with a white wall and a shelf behind them. Emily is on the right and is a white woman with long brown hair up in a ponytail. She uses a motorized wheelchair and is wearing a red top and glasses. Ellen is on the left and is a white woman with short brown hair. She uses a motorized wheelchair and is wearing a yellow top and glasses.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Heumann Perspective. Today, we have a mother-daughter, daughter-mother couple, and I think you'll see through the discussions today the uniqueness of Emily Ladau, who's wearing this lovely rose top, and her mother, Ellen, in a lovely yellow top. What I'm interested in doing today with Emily and her mom is really to talk about some of the unique issues that have come about because both of them have disabilities, which, for me and for most people that I know, we're usually the only disabled person in a family. And so I want to begin by really exploring some of the unique characteristics of being a mother-daughter, daughter-mother team. Emily, what was it like growing up as a child with a mother who had a disability or has a disability?
Oh my goodness. That's a really good question to start off with. And I think it's interesting because I'm not sure how aware of it I was when I was younger. I took it for granted that my mother was just like me, and there was no consciousness of the fact that we were unique in being a mother daughter disabled pair. It wasn't really until I got older that I realized how lucky I was to have a disabled role model in my life who showed me the ropes. I think in a lot of ways unintentionally, right? I think there was a lot of just advocating because we had no choice. That was what we had to do. That was how life was for us. And so when I finally came to realize how rare and special, and I don't mean special in the special needs term sense, I mean
Right.
very
Unique.
special. Like it was a real bond that we had because of the similarities between us. And that is something that, you know, I don't take for granted now, that's for sure. I'm very lucky.
If I could just interject, though, because I unexpectedly passed on my disability, Larson syndrome, to Emily. I spent much of her early childhood until she developed this consciousness of being a proud disabled woman, of really fearing that she would resent me.
Uh, you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit more about that, Ellen?
Well, Jewish mothers are famous for guilt, and but I did have a lot of guilt feelings. My experiences actually weren't, quote, as bad as what Emily had to go through in her early life, and even when she was a teenager, when she had very dangerous cervical spine surgery. But it definitely, any mother suffers when they see their child hurting, and knowing that you passed on this disability only intensified that feeling.
Yeah, there was so much fear of me being resentful because of the pain that I went through, both physical and also emotional. And, I think we have to kind of find that balance between acknowledging that disability can actually be challenging, but also acknowledging how incredible it is to have that bond in our DNA. But my mom didn't know that. How could she have known that I was going to feel the way that I did, that I was going to connect with a community because you weren't connected with the community?
Actually, Emily is the one who brought me into the disabled community and made me start feeling uh, proud as a disabled woman, and certainly proud of all that she's accomplished.
Ellen, how has your experiencing what Emily has been doing over the years changed your view around disability?
It just made me realize that the differences in our life experiences, even though we do share the same disability, we grew up very differently. My husband and I made some, I don't know if they were conscious decisions, but we also had more knowledge. Like we sent her to a camp for disabled children so she wouldn't feel that she was the only disabled person in her school, visibly disabled person in her school. I grew up only knowing my brother Jonathan as sharing the genetic disability, and I think one other boy who had spina bifida in our school district. But it was a very isolating experience, and we wanted to make sure, even though it was very hard to send her to sleepaway camp at such a young age, that she wouldn't feel isolated. And I do think that her summer camp experiences helped her to develop into the woman that she
Oh,
is.
absolutely. I feel really lucky that you went in the complete opposite direction of the experiences that you had growing up and said, no, we don't want her to feel alone. We want her to feel like she has a community of disabled people. And so I wish that you had had that growing up, but I'm also lucky that you came before me and were like, no, this is not great feeling so isolated. So they went out of their way to give me a completely different experience.
So, when did you start seeing yourself as an activist, Emily?
I don't know that there was a specific moment that I turned into an activist. I would say I've always been a rather loud advocate for myself just because that was what I saw modeled for me. And so I was constantly speaking up, but then I was also shying away from disability at times. So I wanted to be identified as disabled only when it felt convenient to me and only when I felt comfortable with it. And then other times, the biggest compliment that you could have paid me was, oh, I don't even think you're disabled. This
Mm-hmm.
was when I was younger. And then I would say midway through college, I just had this, I like to call it my quarter life crisis. At the time, I was actually dating someone who was a wheelchair user. And prior to that, I had kind of said, I don't want to date somebody who has a disability because then it's going to call more attention to my disability. But suddenly I realized if I want someone to accept me for who I am, why should I not accept someone else for who they are? It was, you know, hypocritical, but also just the world that I had grown up in and how I was socialized. And so I started to lean into my disability as an identity. And I think the first very activisty thing that I did in college was they had Disability Awareness Week, and then they also had a couple of other awareness weeks, right in a row. And I said, the way that you're talking about awareness to me makes it sound like it's a problem. You're talking about drunk driving awareness, and then you're talking about disability awareness. So I wrote an op-ed for the school paper and got them to overhaul their Disability Awareness Week. And I think from then on, I realized that this was how I wanted to move forward. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I had something boiling in my blood that made me want to keep going with this.
So she literally called us up on the phone and said, I no longer want to be an English teacher. I want to be a disability rights advocate. And my husband and I said, okay. We had no idea how she was going to do that, but whatever.
So, where did you go to college?
I went to Adelphi University, and the goal had been always to be a high school English teacher. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted out of my future. And then I just took a complete, sharp turn and moved away from it.
But your studying English really has been what you've also been making your career on, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think and I hope it doesn't sound conceited to say this, but I feel like I've just ended up teaching in larger classrooms. And I say that knowing full well that you started out as a teacher and you continue to teach in your own way now, even if not in a classroom. And so I feel like you can teach without being in a traditional classroom.
Oh, absolutely. One other area that I think would be valuable to talk about is your book. And if we could talk a little bit about your book, which is going to be coming out in September, but people can pre-order it now. And I was very privileged to be asked to review the book and give comments on the book. And I think it's really a very, it'll be another great addition to books that are being written by disabled individuals. And you want to tell us a little bit more? It's Demystifying Disability. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to write the book? Maybe what role, Ellen, you played with the book, and what your intention is for the impact of the book.
Well, first of all, just to get the important point out of the way, if you endorse the book, I feel like, I've peaked. That's it. I'm done. We're done. But in in all seriousness, my mom was editor in chief of the book.
Sorry, Caitlin, who is the real editor.
Yeah, my editor was my actual editor at Penguin Random House was fantastic,
Yeah,
but my mother was my chief reader, editor, and listener when I needed to complain, as was my dad. My poor parents, I think they must have heard me complain every night as I wrote this book. But they were also my biggest champions, my parents, and I'm very lucky for that. And so the book actually started because in 2019, I was on a podcast called Call Your Girlfriend. And that was with a good friend of mine, Kelly Dawson, who is a writer who has cerebral palsy. And she's incredible. You can find her on social media. It's at the Crosswalk is her handle. And I love her because she's just like me in that we really like to keep it real and honest about disability. And after I was on that podcast with her, an agent reached out to me and said, I've read your writing before. Have you ever considered writing a book? And so at first, I thought I would write a book about the experience of being a disabled mother-daughter pair. And I wrote up a whole proposal for that. And then my agent
That's her next book.
Oh, gosh. Whew, I don't know if I'm ready for that. But when my agent came back to me and she said, this is a really fantastic story, but something about the way you communicate tells me that maybe you're the person to help give people a little bit of a starting point for disability, because a lot of the books that exist about disability right now, which so many of them are fantastic and powerful, also operate on a little bit of an assumption that we already have some of the basic understanding of disability. So, an understanding of what disability is, how do we talk about disability, how do we think about it, what is disability history, what does that even mean, and how do we interact with disabled people just like with anyone else, and how do we see disability in media? Do we see disability in media? And so I wanted to give people that starting point to get some of their questions answered so that then they can take that knowledge, use Demystifying Disability as a reference book, and consider it just the beginning of their learning. I want to make super clear that I'm one disabled person. I speak only for myself. I am not the expert on all disabilities, but what I wanted to do was clear up or demystify some of the questions that people have so that then they can take that knowledge and use it to be better and more informed allies, advocates, accomplices, whatever you want to call it, for the disability community.
Did you intend for your mother to play the role that she did play with the book as you were writing it?
I always knew that that was going to be the case. I mean, so my mom is my best friend. If you can't, if I can't trust what she says, I can't trust what anybody says. And so I got very, very lucky that she was willing to go on this wild ride with me and, read the book so many times that I think you're sick of it. Sometimes she just starts reciting the intro to me.
Actually, ironically, when she started writing the book, she read me the first paragraph, and I just immediately said, "No."
Yep, she was like, "Absolutely not. Do it again."
Too textbooky.
So yeah, all credit for reining me in. If it got a little academic, goes to her.
Did this experience bring you closer together?
Except for when we argued over everything.
we have a big history over comma placements. I don't understand how she was taught commas.
She does not use enough commas.
That was our biggest
commas fight. Are excellent punctuation marks. Yeah, no, we're nothing will break our bond. Certainly not this.
So Emily and Ellen, in the last couple of months, you kind of took a twist in relationship to injuries. So could you explain to us what happened to you?
Oh my gosh. The last couple of months have been a bit of an unexpected circus around here. So I was sitting in a chair in the corner of my living room, like right behind me, and I dropped my water bottle and I was thirsty. So I leaned over to pick it up and it was just a little bit too out of my reach. I have, contractures in both arms. So my arms only go out about this far. And so I thought, I could just lean forward and reach it, but my arm didn't go far enough and my whole body went down. I fell right on my left leg and just twisted the whole thing. And, I broke my leg, dislocated my shoulder. And so
all on the same side. So that was fun.
like my whole left side was just like, we're going to rebel against you all at once. And that was quite the adventure. And my leg decided, instead of healing, to just, go in the opposite direction of healing. And so we ended up going through the whole process of me having surgery at the end of June. But it's been an exercise in figuring out how to further adapt the things that we've already had to adapt.
So what were some of the lessons that you learned?
Patience. That's the biggest one. And one that I feel that we already have had to have a lot of because of life in a disabled body. I think that is an interesting contradiction that people have a hard time wrapping their minds around if they're not disabled. The understanding that disability in and of itself can be a challenging experience, and also that we can hold room for pride and feeling proud of who we are and embracing the identity and the community, the culture, the history. So nobody is static. Absolutely nobody. Everybody is, levels of movement, of mobility change. And that's normal and that's okay. And I think that we need to kind of hold some space for the fact that bodies are not static and that they evolve.
So are you going to be writing about any of this? Not necessarily in a book, but in some articles?
I think so, because I really want to talk about those contradictions of feeling pride in who you are, but also recognizing that bodies can be fallible things.
Being disabled is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think we really need to get okay with acknowledging that that contradiction exists. But also, when I say that being disabled is hard, I'm not asking you to pity me. I'm asking you to do something about it.
Exactly.
I'm asking you to
support us.
yeah, like I'm asking you to advocate for home and community-based services, to advocate for access to healthcare, to advocate for better public transportation. It's like, I think there's this assumption that when you talk about disability and when you talk about something changing in your body, that people are looking at it as a sob story. But no, it's a call to action.
Well, this has really been a great opportunity to be with both of you. Ellen, thank you so much for bringing this lovely daughter into the world, and thank your husband for his part in this.
We'll let him know.
We'll definitely let him know.
And Emily, thank you so much for all you've been doing and all you'll continue to do. And we'll also put information in about how people can pre-order your book, which will be coming out in September. Is that correct?
That is correct. September 7th.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Judy.
History won't forget us or try to minimize our pain. And so why